Matt, an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you today, my friend. Thank you so much for joining our discussion today. Firstly, for anyone who may not be aware of your following, although I think that's unlikely given your presence on social media, can you just introduce yourself a little bit and tell our listeners about who you are and why we're talking today, please, my friend?
Hi, James. Thank you. The pleasure is mine, my friend. We go back a long way. Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Porcelli. I'm based here in New Jersey in the USA, which is, as I tell people, it is a separate state from New York. Everybody says, hey, Matt from New York. Well, I work now between states, so I guess now you can use both. I am a security manager with Harbor Protection Services. I've been in the private security industry now for the better half of 20 years. My main forte is contract security management, dabbled in basically every type of contract from executive protection to global headquarters to airline and aviation security, as well as do a lot of volunteer leadership with organizations such as ASIS International, the Life Safety Alliance, the Security Institute, ISRM, so forth. Just find me on LinkedIn. Like I said, that's probably a little easier. I don't want to take up too much, but I'm very, very honored to be here with you, James, and huge supporter of Centurion Media and ISJ, SJA, and all of the great publications you guys put out. So thank you, and keep up the great work, guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt. And likewise, thank you for your valuable contributions over the years. And we've worked, like you say, we've worked together for a number of years on, we did quite a lot of content focused on the ASIS chapters around the world and some really exciting initiatives. So it's great to reconnect in this fashion as well. Sometimes it's nice to kind of speak rather than communicating through print, I think, sometimes as well. So very refreshing. Obviously, your resume in the industry speaks for itself, Matt, but there's a couple talking points we've agreed that we want to just focus on a little bit today. And I think it's fair to say that the centre of our discussion's kind of looking at the role of the frontline security officer, but also perceptions. And I think that's it's always quite a challenging subject to unravel, really. But we'll give it our best go. And that leads me into one of the initial talking points we wanted to focus on, really. And I think when we look at this idea of the uniform guard and maybe looking outside of our industry scope, but looking at public perception of what security is and what security looks like, I think I'd be really interested to hear your insights in terms of how those responsibilities and skills have grown so much that they've outgrown the stereotype, but also what does it mean in terms of how we deploy guards, and how do we keep shaking that perspective up for maybe some outdated public perception that security's, stereotypes and out of date. How do we look to address that, Matt?
Thank you, James. Well, the main thing is the vernacular right there, guards. One thing about me is I never use that word, and a lot of people, especially, and forgive me, I left out IFPO, the International Foundation of Protection Officers, which I'm very, very involved with as well. They, along with myself and other affiliates, we don't use the word guard. We use officer, security professional, and so forth. Back before, at some point, when the industry started, guard was used as there was a term of respect, at least that I've seen. But now, as time, actually before then when time went on, it was usually seen more as a pulse-filling position rather than a career position. So the first thing is, if you want to change, the way I look at it, if you want to change the stereotype, change the feeling or the outset or the psychological mindset. So that's the first thing, because guard is really, it's usually a byword that a lot of people use. I know when I was a security officer, when I first started, I couldn't stand being called a guard. And even though, people weren't intentionally doing it to be mean, and I know in some countries like Canada, they can't. I think some provinces, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can't use officer. You have to use guard because of the way that with law enforcement. But however, security, and this kind of segues into your other question, security, especially frontline security, is not what it used to be. Now, I always use this in a lot of my presentations, is that, both voluntarily when I speak and also, with work, that security isn't just security. It's really a 4-pillar system. It's customer service or hospitality, security, safety, and technology. So security professionals, no longer the guards, security professionals are really that frontline melting pot of all those acumens and professions. And I feel, especially with the world not getting any less scary, so to speak, that frontline piece is not getting any less less needed. I mean, they're security officers, security professionals, that front line of the concentric circles of protection, as we call it, is a dire need.
Yeah.
So the more that people, companies, organizations invest, not only monetarily, but faith, in and give them the guidance they need, the more that they will be successful. And those officers will go from the guard mentality to the security professional mentality.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that the word professional there is so critical, really. It's one of the centerpieces, I think, of most of the content I certainly come across in the frontline space, and also a lot of the discussions we have at events, like things like GSX coming up, that these are the conversations which take center stage in many ways. But when we look at security on the front line in that sense, putting people in contact with those vulnerable, frustrated or frightened moments, what does it look like to lead with understanding and empathy in those situations? I mean, we look at the role of the security officer now, and it's so multifaceted, but obviously that brings, I guess, with it expectation as well in terms of what you want from your leaders on the front line. Can you highlight what it means to lead appropriately in those settings, please, Matt?
Yes, absolutely, James. So security officers are people, plain and simple, like anybody, like you, myself, anybody else. Sometimes that's lost on the public or other people. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, we have some great people that come across my officers, treat them, but let's be fair. I mean, there are individuals that I've seen just, even out and about with my family that won't even look at certain security officers, or some that are mistreated. I mean, some are actually better treated now just based on the state of the way the world is right now. I mean, especially now with the U.S., with the 250th anniversary of the country, and big events, and with FIFA World Cup and everything like that. But I know for me, my leadership style is that if you treat the person with empathy and respect, and especially, I know I'm not the only one that was a security officer that's now in management, but when you relate to them on that level, if you've worked that Christmas, or if you worked that hurricane, which I have, and which a lot of my colleagues have, they'll relate to you. They know that you've worked in the trenches, as I've called it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, those that haven't don't know what it's like to work in the trenches, but they relate better to you. So it's not just, okay, you have a pulse, but I have a family member who's sick. No, you're scheduled to work. So you find you basically invest in your people, and you find the best possible solution. You work with them. And I tell people this, and they think I'm being sarcastic. I always tell them I have 3 kids and 30 more children. And I don't mean that in a negative.
Yeah.
I mean that more, in a, because again, like if something is happening in their lives and whatnot, I'll follow up with them. And again, a lot of my colleagues, my current colleagues and co-managers do this too. That's why I'm very happy with where I am now, is because when you have that centralized focus, I've had officers come up to me and my other managers who I've seen grown, throughout their career, and they've said, I've heard probably the best compliment I can get is that you're probably the only manager that's ever cared this much about me.
Yeah.
And I've always also said that, I could always slow down the revolving door. I can't stop it, but as far as, it's just treat people like people. You have to be understanding, because that's how I would like to be treated.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very poignant point, and in that sense, and it ties quite heavily into this idea we're going to come onto now about volunteering, actually, and I think having a genuine approach to being forward-facing and contributing to the industry we're in. With that in mind, when you talk about those engagements and when you see other people engage in their professional capacity, when it comes to volunteering, how do you ensure motivation stays grounded in the right reasons over time, rather than, I don't know, I think it's easy to say, call people influencers these days. We're all guilty of it. Certainly us at ISJ sometimes as well. But part of what we do is we want to build that influence, but part of that is doing it for the right reasons. So how do you see striking that balance between contributing but also keeping, I guess, a level of integrity and trying to keep things focused as well?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, James, it's really you have to hone in on your mentorship skills. Like I know with me, like overseeing with ASIS, I was now it's Next Gen, but I was chair of young professionals for years.
Yeah.
And co-chair of young professionals. I mean, I still have, now that I'm 41, I've actually I guess you never really outgrown young professionals. Now it's more transitioning professionals and so forth. But when you see like I'm pretty good at, and especially like any security professional, catching red flags.
Yeah.
You're really good at spotting people and the reasons, like, their objectives. I mean, yeah, you have people that are volunteering for reasons that they really legitimately want to help. But you have people that are doing it for other reasons. Now, I can't be one to judge. But when it comes to seeing the way that people volunteer their time, the way I could do it is I could help redirect them. I've seen everything from disgruntled people volunteering because they don't they want to inflate their CV because of some form of inadequacy that they feel because they've been wronged at their current position. I've seen people that want to get a better commission and sell more. And listen, I respect that because that's their livelihood as far as the sales part.
Yeah.
However, my formula is that if you got to lead it with passion. If you don't pay it forward, there's no reward to it. Somebody had said to me, I believe it was a number of years ago, when I first started volunteering, she had said to me that it's always great to volunteer, but when you're asked to contribute, it's always that much more special. I mean, there are people that have they think that they have the whole volunteers leadership formula figured out, but I believe that really, James, everybody has their own formula.
Yeah.
There are people that have 1,000 acronyms after their names on LinkedIn and stuff. And I'm friends with a lot of them, and a lot of them really deserve them. I mean, I have a few after my name too, but that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek example. However, when I go to GSX, when I go to these conferences and speak to these conferences, or people hit me up on LinkedIn and say, hey, I've seen your profile, I have a question about this or that or whatnot. What I don't want to see is somebody waste their time investing in a more or less a bogus certification or a course that is just a money-making scam that has no backing behind it. I mean, you got all these organizations. You have IFPO, ASIS, ISRM, even the Life Safety Alliance, which I'm very much involved in. The melting pot doesn't end. And the one thing that I think people I know people have to leverage if they're listening, is that take it from people like, and like myself, yourself, and all the other people that we've learned, that we've connected and networked with over the years, that we know what we're talking about. So if you see, oh, wow, this certification in counterterrorism, extremism, coolness, awesomeness is only $14. No, don't do that. That like I said,
yeah,
you get that a lot of because the market, the people that are putting that stuff out, they know how to capitalize on that.
Yeah,
that's my long-winded way of saying, James, just be careful, and it's all a networking group. My whole point to all this is, if you're unsure, I'm very reachable. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's why I do this, because I want to help those where I was in that position myself.
Yeah, I think that's a very honest take there, Matt. Thank you for that. Just finally, there's a bit of a closing comment from you. I'd love to, based on those experiences you've lived and the conversations you're always looking to generate. What does it mean to experience security or public safety as a calling? I guess for those who may not be aware of that process, rather than simply as a profession. I think it's a very personal experience for everyone, but how do you see that as a calling rather than just simply a job or title?
Well, for me, James, yeah, it's definitely it's a calling, not a profession. I mean, I've always been very open as being a very devout Roman Catholic. My family is as well. The Pontifical Swiss Guard have inspired me to go into security, and I always say jokingly, no, they didn't call me and ask me to go into security. Obviously, as you could see, if you ever see me virtually or in person, I have the Vatican lapel pin and the CPP pin together for a reason. That's to illustrate that passion. But for, as far as security, I mean, to me, the most important thing and why I feel I was put on this earth was, and again, not to sound cheesy, was to protect people. That was the
Yeah.
And remember, those that are aspiring to go into any field, don't try to figure it out it's not going to happen all at once. You have to go through these ebb and flows and disappointments. I wanted to be a cop, and that didn't work out. People still think I am because of my haircut and my tie. They think I'm a detective. They think, and I'm like, no, I mean, I've worked with detectives, when I've done my auxiliary and 911, you guys call it 999, but 911 police dispatching and whatnot. But it's a lot more fulfilling when it's a calling, not a profession. And the best way I could explain it is the adage that goes, when you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
I think that's a very nice way of concluding this session, Matt. And I want to thank you so much for joining me on today's discussion. And no, fantastic, and always a pleasure to reconnect and hear your insights. So, for anyone listening, I would encourage you to follow Matt on LinkedIn, engage with what he talks about. Like I say, he's an open book. We want to drive these discussions, and Matt is at the forefront of leading that narrative and having those engagements when it comes to things like professionalization and changing perceptions, really. So, Matt, thank you once again.
My pleasure, my friend. Take care. Be safe.